At our shop, there was someone who went to the restroom and didn't come back. Looking at their face, I was like, what to do? Sometimes while doing makeup like this, their expression suddenly brightens. You can always see the groom in the mirror. If they don't come back for a while, I wonder if something's wrong. And sometimes the makeup gets wiped off. When the groom arrives, let's get started. I'll start by tidying up the fine hairs under your eyebrows. For people with dry skin, if you miss spots like the size of the nose, it gets really dry. So make sure to carefully check and apply product to these areas. Every bride has a different skin tone. So before applying the base, evening out the skin tone is also part of the process to create that kind of skin. That's why we keep applying different skincare products to get as close as possible to naturally healthy looking skin with the makeup. For this person, I need to apply this much product to achieve that kind of skin tone. Otherwise, I need to create a skin condition where the makeup will last or have that inner glow. Because if I don't, when I apply the base, it can crack, feel dry, not last, or get cakey the more I apply it, which happens quite often. This person also has skin that can handle a brighter tone right now. When I usually teach base makeup, I use only half of this amount. But when I do makeup for brides, I use a lot more. This means the product is applied in a thicker layer. You need to use more BB cream than foundation to achieve that inner glow, that radiance. After letting it absorb all over the face, I use whatever's left to apply on the eyelids. Apply a thin layer on the eyelids. Sometimes there are people who have wrinkles here. For those people, when you're doing makeup here, ask them to open their eyes. Tell them to look up at the ceiling. When they do that, the skin here gets stretched and tightened. In that state, you can apply the base here. That way, the product gets into all the creases. It won't separate or break apart. Since this is for a shoot, we're going to use some powder, but we haven't finished the base perfectly yet. So I'll go ahead and set the brows with powder. Just by looking, you can tell that the eyes might look a bit puffy in photos right now. So I'm going to add shading all over. But these days, there are a lot of people who don't want to do this much makeup, even for shoots. But since we know how to make someone look pretty in a classic way, we try to at least do that much. Look up, do you like the brush I'm using right now? Do you like this brush? When you do the basics, there are things like this too. For me, the color doesn't go on very well. And a lot of powder flies everywhere. Even if you tap this one off, the color payoff is still good. And it blends softly, so I end up using this one a lot. But when I do heavier makeup, I'll use this one a lot in those cases. When defining the eye shape, in the case of this model, her double eyelid starts a bit from the middle, right? So since the inner corner isn't fully open, I connect the shadow from the front as well. That way, even if the color is light, it still gives the impression that the inner corner is more open. So I'll apply the line here as well, so the color shows up in this area. And there are also many people whose eyes lack definition. In that case, if you hold it like this and add some tension while drawing, you can get in one go without having to touch up multiple times. If you draw with the intention of, I'm going to draw this, it can end up looking too heavy. So when you're first applying shadow, just try to connect the remaining areas lightly. That way, the shading will reach all the way to the end of the eye socket, just like I mentioned. Honestly, drawing both lines symmetrically is actually the hardest part. So if you first create a guide with shadow and then later draw the liquid line, you'll make fewer mistakes and it will look better. Since the shadow is a bit thicker and we use a thin brush for the liner, the difference in area and intensity actually helps the two sides match up more easily. That's why this guide is pretty important when you're drawing it, especially for those who are new to makeup. If you slightly lift your eyelid when using the eyelash curler, you can catch the lashes right at the roots. Some brides actually prefer to use only a bold black, but I usually mix the colors, just lift a little and fill in only the inner gaps. I've tried a lot of different brushes, but this one is wide, so it's really comfortable to draw with. It helps keep the lines from getting uneven. And remember, we set up that guide earlier. You don't have to connect it all the way to the end, but just lightly follow the guide as you draw. With a point brush, you go over the area we just drew to add another layer. That way, it doesn't smudge and has a fixing effect. So it goes on smoothly. And it also softens the areas that might look shiny. As a result, it makes things look a bit clearer and the thickness changes slightly as well. Right now, this eye is more closed compared to the other one. You know what I mean, right? It's kind of pressed down. This part is lifted, so should we look up this way? If you do it like this, you can see this area. Now look down like this. If you do that, another spot appears, right? look down. You know about eyelashes, right? A 45-degree angle. When teaching, I noticed people would just stick them on like this because they couldn't see. You hurt your back. Even if you can't see with your eyes, there's a spot where you need to attach it. You can see it like this, lift it up slightly. The angle it needs to go in at. If the curl is holding, we don't have to forcefully curl it with an eyelash curler, right? If you maintain the curl from the very beginning when attaching them, the process becomes much easier later on. Like I mentioned earlier, you won't have to worry about them falling off while using a curler or drooping later on, even as time passes. Of course, you need to lift your natural lashes well at first, but it's best to attach them in line with that flow. For weddings, I prefer to finish here and have the line come out naturally. These days, because transparent masks are heavy, the lashes can droop. But if the roots aren't attached at the front, they'll end up separating. That's why I did it this way. From the beginning, I discussed how we're going to do the eyebrows and tidy them up a bit before starting. Or in my case, if the eyebrows are really beautiful, I tend to insist on my opinion. I take a photo like this and tell them to take a picture. Otherwise, for the wedding ceremony, I always recommend doing it this way. And for the photo shoot, I suggest they tidy up their brows if they want. But honestly, if the eyebrows are this beautiful, there's really no need to touch them. And you see this part here is a bit sparse. Just lightly filling this area, absolutely don't touch anywhere else. And you always have to start from the back and move forward with a brush that has nothing on it. If the front gets too dark, it can look heavy, harsh, and almost square, which takes away the softness. After that, brush through with a spoolie. For those with naturally dark eyebrows like this, I don't use eyebrow colors, but rather opt for lighter shades. By mixing these low saturation colors and just filling in the gaps here and there, you can avoid making the brows look too thick. If you do it wrong, only your eyebrows will stand out. Usually during a shoot, there are several different dresses. So you might wear a dress like this, but you also wear a top dress. Most of the time, makeup is done after putting on the top dress. Even if you change outfits later, this needs to be the base. So if you have to shoot this first, we do it this way and take care of it for you. For the actual ceremony, the look is usually pure and clear, and even the lips are done in a more transparent way. But during the shoot, we tend to shape the lips a bit more. In photos, we create overall facial structure, shaping the bone structure, so to speak. So sometimes we do overlining on the lips or create a wing lip shape, but in this model's case, her upper and lower lip balance is good, so just adding some color should be enough. Sometimes while doing makeup like this, the expression brightens up. You can always see the groom in the mirror. If he hasn't been coming by and I wonder if something's wrong today, sometimes it turns out he's out getting mint chocolate. It feels really awkward when the groom comes in. At this point, sometimes the bride says she wants something even brighter. Rather than having the lips look washed out, this is a slightly toned down color. In that case, I add some color on top of this base. These days, quite a few people want to make just their lips the focal point. First of all, since the base itself is brightened, people don't think the tone is dark. Even if the lips are bright, it's not the old-fashioned red, but rather a mixed, slightly muted deep red. Earlier, the front part here was drooping down, right? But even if you don't do heavy makeup, even with big eyes, they won't look like that in photos, will they? So that's why we add shading. Even at our shop, there are people who go to the bathroom and don't come out. They look at their face and think, what should I do? Some people do that. But when everything is finished here and Alan, they're just standing there, it really looks like a mother of the bride hairstyle. That kind of hairstyle, since we take care of all those things at the end, you just need to reassure them and quickly make any necessary touch-ups. Here, I'm using the exact same color as I did on the top. Usually, people say you shouldn't use shimmer, but when you're brightening the lower part, you apply it more broadly overall. I actually use shimmer. Even during shoots, at first, we press down the color with this, right? But since the base is already so bright, you can control the shading with just this. Then, by applying this underneath, you get the effect of agiosal, and it also balances out the proportions of the whole face. The more shadow you have underneath, the larger your eyes look, and this area appears narrower. So, to make this area look as small as possible, I usually apply it up to here. But if you do it like that for the actual ceremony, the makeup can look heavy and cakey in person because there's a lot applied. Whereas for photo shoots, the makeup shows up on camera, so the colors appear richer on screen. In the photos, I don't use glitter. I use it for the actual ceremony. But for photo shoots, I don't use glitter, just this level of shimmer. Glitter can look messy. The color doesn't show up on camera. And when you do this part and say, try lifting your eyes, if the color seems a bit lacking, just adding a touch of color on top suddenly makes it pop. But these days, we don't use this much color anymore. It actually looks a bit heavy and gives the whole face a color look. But you should expect about 30% of it to disappear here. When filming, that is, and you definitely need to do shading contouring is important now. Make sure to contour the nose bridge and blend out the line that comes down here. When shading the tip of the nose, do you also press in the sides of the nostrils? Yeah, like this right here. Did you know that? If you apply shadow on a thinner area, it goes on much better. That's why I always say this part needs to be thin. It's the same here. Even if you don't apply much to the nose, since it's already light, just one touch creates a clear shadow here. so the shading looks even more natural. No shading, that is. This is the final step for coverage. If the area under my eyes looks dark, I usually apply concealer diagonally here. Each of these little effects makes a big difference in photos. And when you look at the overall result, it feels balanced, pretty, and the base looks well done, making the finish look more polished. But for the actual ceremony, the makeup is much more natural. It's not so much that the base itself is different, but rather for the ceremony, we use more oily or radiant products like oil sprays and similar items to create that look. For photo shoots, the approach is different because the goal is to maintain that look throughout the shoot. So people often ask what's different between the ceremony and the shoot. If you ask that, the feel of the base is different, the products are different, and the shading and other details are different too. But honestly, the fundamentals are all pretty similar. The reaction is usually much better during the actual ceremony, but during the rehearsal, since it's the first time, people tend to think that's prettier. But the ceremony has its own unique vibe, so it does feel different. The ceremony is the final stage of the whole process.